In this video, let us now compare Tommy and Arthur. This is Tommy and this is Arthur. Uh, this is the equation that represents the income of Tommy. We've seen that earlier also. Here, this is the equation that represents the money Arthur is left with. So essentially, Y represents the money in both of their pockets, right? Y is the this Y represents the money Tommy has, and this Y represents the money Arthur has. Though the key difference is Tommy is earning money by selling donuts, whereas Arthur is losing money by spending them on donuts, right? The remaining of the equation is pretty much similar apart from this number right here, which is m. If you remember from the general form, y equals mx plus c. M is different. Here m is 2, whereas in this case it is minus 2. So that's the difference between the two equations. Rest, it is exactly same. Here I have the two graphs for both of them respectively, and on the face of it you can very clearly see a very major difference between the two graphs. This graph seems to be rising, right? It goes up as you go forward towards the x-axis, and this one seems to be going downwards in the positive x-axis direction, right? Now what does that mean? Well, this simply means as Tommy sells more and more donuts, his income also keeps on increasing, right? Makes very much sense. The more donuts he sells, the higher his income will be. Whereas as the number of donuts increase in case of Arthur, the money he's left with will keep on reducing. Why? Because he's spending his money on donuts. Whereas here, Tommy is earning through those donuts, whereas Arthur is spending the money through the donuts. So, right. So I hope the direction of the graph makes sense. Now we can also see that plus 4, which is C, the y-intercept, is same for both of them, which means both of them started at the same point, right? Both of them at the start had $4 in their pockets. Tommy had $4 as rent from John, if you remember, whereas Arthur just had $4 in his pocket, perhaps through his pocket money or something like that. So both of them start at the same position at 4 plus 4, but Arthur spends and goes down from that point, whereas Tommy earns and goes up from that point. Now the rate at which Tommy increases and Arthur goes down, that is different. If you look at this case, as Tommy sells one donut, he earns $2. As and so as he keeps on increasing his sale by a single donut, he increases his income by $2 more. So plus 2 for every donut sold. Whereas here, for every donut eaten, he loses $2, right? This difference is $2, but he loses it, so minus 2. And if you see, that number really corresponds to m of his equation, whereas this plus 2 really corresponds to the m of his own equation. So essentially this m tells us the rate at which this equation would increase or decrease, or rather change. In this case, because it is plus 2, it is increasing, and because here we have a minus 2, it is decreasing. So essentially it tells us at what rate a particular graph will increase or decrease. Now this also corresponds to how steep this graph is. If you look at this one, it looks like it is going uphill, right? And if you look at Arthur's graph, it looks like it is going downhill, right? You could perhaps walk on this line similar to walking down a hill, whereas this looks like it is going up a hill. And that is why, because it is the m that really determines if it is going up a hill, down a hill, how steep that is going to be. We'll look at that in the following videos. So it is the value of m that really determines that. That's why m is known as the slope. It is the slope of the curve. So m is known as the slope, which is this number, and this number really determines how steep this graph will be, and will it be going upwards or downwards, and so on and so forth. If it is positive, the graph will be going upwards, right? Makes sense. Every incremental change in x will result in an incremental positive change, which means it will be going upwards. Whereas here, as you go 1 unit in the x direction, you'll get a negative 2 units of change in the negative direction, right? Because it's negative here, and that really corresponds to its downwards nature. So that is the idea of slope, which is represented by the letter m in this general form, and that is really all that you need to know about slope.